Well, as Carlos said, my name is Rosaline and I'm from the north of Ireland, but obviously with Irish in my blood. Um, First of all, I would like to say thank you very much to the UK group for the invitation to speak and share part of my story, and also to thank Mark. He's been a tremendous support to me personally and certainly to members of our group. So it's very difficult to cover the story. It's a long one, and not many Irish people can tell the shortened versions of stories, but I'll do my very best. I'm just so really what happened was I was born and raised in Glasgow. I was born at Lennoxtown Hospital and I was raised at Bridgeton Cross and lived in Baillieston for a while. My mother was from Castlederg and my father was from Burt in County Donegal. So he wanted to return home. So we moved to Donegal when I was 14 and the oldest of 5 children. And that was in 1974. We had never heard of amyloidosis at all until my paternal aunt Polly took ill in the early 1980s. And at that stage, she was in different hospitals, speaking to different doctors. Nobody could figure out what was wrong. Over time, different experts were coming from different parts of the world. And in 1986, my father had the conversation with me to say, Rosaline, they're saying that this disease is a hereditary one. I think it's going to have implications for us. But at that stage, I was young and invincible. So I parked it in my head, but I didn't really give it a huge amount of thought. But I was aware that it was something serious. And my father was very aware that it was something serious. So we have to, I have to say that we didn't know about it in my family. It came through my maternal grandmother. She died at the age of 45, giving birth to her 13th child. So she was too young for any amyloidosis symptoms to be present. So it wasn't part of the fabric of our family history at all until my Aunt Polly. So we fast forward a bit, and in 1991, my father developed symptoms. And my father was primarily polyneuropathy. And as Carlos said, I'm a patient and I seem to be following in line with his symptoms. As all of the medical experts here will know, it can manifest differently, even among members of the same family. So my father took ill in 1991. The early symptoms were basically, unsteadiness in his feet and all of the things that go with a breakdown. And no treatments were available at all, as everyone knows. He did participate, as many other people did, in studies and trials. And remember, at one stage, he was getting nerve biopsies done in the hospital here in Belfast, which were very, very painful for him. And he said, I know that you can't do anything for me, but do whatever you need to do for me to help the ones coming after. So I've always respected him for that. And I carry that very, very deeply for him and the other people like him that subjected themselves to procedures, knowing that it couldn't help them. So my father's progression was incredibly difficult. It was a long, drawn out process. And my father spent the final 22 months of his life here in the Foyle Hospice in Derry, basically wasting away. He was not much over 5 stone when he died. He was basically flesh and bones. And it was just an absolutely horrendous experience to watch. In 2007, I decided to go for genetic testing. I really wanted to know. And I went over to the National Amyloidosis Centre. It involved a range of tests at that stage, but very much a discussion about the family history. And at that stage, renal biopsy was part of the procedure, which wasn't very pleasant for me. And I'm sure it was less pleasant for the lovely Dr. Ari Stanju, who was carrying out the test. So at that stage, they confirmed that I carried the gene. They confirmed that there were no treatments available. And one of the lovely professors suggested to me that I just make the very best of my life. He explained the disease might not manifest, but that it probably would, but it might not come until I was 70, 80 or 90. There were so many unknowns to it. So I was, I was only in my 40s, and I remember walking out onto the busy London street after hearing the news, and I really don't have the words to describe the loneliness that I felt, because there was nobody to speak to. And the thing about having a hereditary disease like that is you really don't want to burden your family members or your brother or sisters, because they're all coping with it in their own way. So I've never forgotten me walking out of that hospital with that knowledge. And really, really deep down, there was a very strong instinct in me. And I really believed that I was going to develop the disease. So I have to fast forward again. In 2013, I'm now 53. I thought to myself, I'll probably have a good maybe 5 years left. So I retired and I went traveling for as long as I could, because I'd obviously watched my father go off his feet. First of all, crawling to the bathroom, then he's in the wheelchair, then he's in a hospice bed for 22 months. So that really motivated me to go and do the very best that I could with the remaining, functional time that I had left. So, and I'm single and I had no ties, so I was able to do that. So I'm traveling in Turkey. It's October 2018. I'm in perfect health, and I go to bed this one night, and I'm woken in the early hours of the morning with sudden onset bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome. So I'm in Turkey and I have 2 hands and 2 arms that are not working. So emergency surgery in Turkey on my right hand. They wanted me to come back in a couple of weeks to do the left hand. I didn't want to do that because I thought the Royal Free will probably want to, see the nerves, whatever. So at this stage, I'm mulling over what I'm going to do. At that stage, I believed 90% that the disease had started. So we roll forward a couple of months. I go with friends to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, a dream holiday, had planned it for so long. At this stage, my legs are getting more and more tired. I'm carrying weights on my ankles. I've burning sensations, electric shocks, pins and needles, numbness, all of the signs that you all know of. And when we walk in the entrance of the Grand Bazaar, I say very quietly to my friends, I'm feeling a wee bit unwell. I didn't want to tell anybody. I said, so I'll wait for here until you finish and come back for me. And you couldn't have paid me to walk any further. My legs had just really stopped working. So within a few short weeks of that, I go swimming, realize that I can't feel the soles of my feet at all. And that is May of 2019. So within 6 months, my disease progressed very rapidly from nothing to all of these problems. So there's a lot more to the story, but in Turkey in May, I'm deciding what to do. I'm very upfront. I had always known that I wasn't going to follow my father's path. He had said to me in the hospice, if I'd known it was going to be so bad for so long, I would have done something about it while I could. And I had always had an exit strategy planned, which suited my personality for when I felt compromised by Amy. I wasn't going to go through it myself. I certainly wasn't going to put my family through it. So they're the sort of thoughts that I'm having in Turkey in May of 2019. Very lonely place and very scary. I'm not what people sometimes say, oh, you're very strong. I have cried tears over this and been terrified and went to hell and back in my head. But most people have to find a way of coping. So anyway, the next thing that happens is that I hear of new treatments and I see the news with my lovely Vince talking about the new treatments. I couldn't believe it. Since my 20s, I thought this thing was going to kill me in the most diabolical fashion. And now there are no treatments. So I had such a brain spin. It was something I hadn't even factored into the equation. So I get over to London and the disease was confirmed in October 2019. And I was prescribed patisiran. So one of my professors said to me, being diagnosed in the first year of the illness, that I was diagnosed much earlier than most. If she was to make a stab at it, perhaps 2 years earlier than most. So I was incredibly grateful for that because I knew my family history and I knew enough of the red flag symptoms. So it was while I was sitting in the National Amyloidosis Centre in October that I made a commitment that I would come home and I would let other people know about this because there were treatments. As Dr. Brennan had said, so many people buried their head in the sand or denial, or doctors would say, why investigate this thing? There's nothing that can be done. But the whole world had changed now. So I thought I'll go back and I'll start raising awareness as best I can and start letting people know. And I really wanted other people to get diagnosed earlier and to get treatment earlier because I, like so many people, had watched, loved ones die from it. And I should say, in the intervening period, my Aunt Polly, her son Stephen, my cousin, died in 2017 at the age of 58 with this disease also. And that also broke my heart. And he and I had spent our childhood in Glasgow and fighting over turns to go on his rocking horse and all of those fond, wonderful memories. And obviously I loved my Aunt Polly. She was always very good to us. So when you see it happening to other people, I thought, I don't want it to happen to anybody else. And I definitely wanted my extended family to know this was in our midst. Anyway, so I also meant to thank in here too, well, it's definitely the medical professionals for all the work that you do. I mean, you've absolutely no idea the amount of gratitude that people like me have for you, and the pharmaceutical companies for working with patient groups and helping raise awareness and all that they do. So I decided to start the All Ireland Support Group. As you'll all know, like, Ireland was a full island of 32 counties up until 100 years ago yesterday. Many of us here live on both sides of the border, work on both sides of the border. We really don't see that border up in this part of the world. It's all very much intermingled. And it was only then that I realized that patisiran was not available in the Republic of Ireland. So that's a story for another day. But we organized the group. It was our formal first birthday on the 1st of May. We decided on that date to celebrate the Celtic Festival of Life and Renewal. In that year, we're now almost 300 members. We have a closed Facebook group and then an open Facebook awareness page. And for 19 months, myself, 5 other admins and a number of other group members have worked and worked and worked to lobby the Irish government. We're in the newspapers every other week. We're in local radio stations. We've contacted every minister, well, practically every minister in Ireland. We've raised 5 parliamentary questions about why the treatment's not available there. For Irish patients to be ill or dying in Irish hospitals from an Irish disease is beyond ironic. We believe that we will have a decision sometime in May, but I'm very grateful. And the timing, you see, was just perfect for the group to be organized, to put that pressure on, to have the patient voice heard. If the group had maybe started 2 or 3 years later and the decision had been made to not make the treatment available in Ireland. I don't know how we would have managed that. So the timing was perfect for that. The beautiful thing about the group, apart from all the hard work and apart from all the lobbying and whatever, are the number of people who say that in speaking to us or any one of us personally, it's the first time they've been able to speak to somebody with hereditary amyloidosis. In this part of the world, I meant to just say in 2007, when the genetic testing was confirmed for me, at that stage, I went over to Boston to meet with Professor Benson. He had been over and had met with my father. And at that stage, liver transplantation was being carried out for THR60 ALA people, as you'll all know. Professor Benson set it up that I could meet 2 liver transplant patients. At that stage, they were quite surprised and shocked that it hadn't worked as well as anticipated. We all understand now at that stage it was sort of divided into neuropathy and cardiomyopathy, and they didn't understand all of that. So it was leaving Boston. I also knew that I wasn't going to go for a liver transplant. I meant to add that in. So things are progressing all the time. We're able to support people. Obviously, we can't give advice. We're not trained, but we can make suggestions to them. We can discuss genetic testing. We emphasize the need for contact with the National Amyloidosis Centre. The diagnosis is very slow. We have members of our group who have had family members who have been told that they're histrionic or need psychiatric help. How could so many things be wrong with them? People who have been ill, attending with so many different consultants for 4 to 5 years and longer. So the amount of pain and suffering and anguish is something that we are determined, absolutely committed to changing as very best that we can. In the north of Ireland, our consultant has to apply for individual funding for treatment. So even though I was prescribed patisiran in October of 2019, my treatment didn't commence until July of 2020. For a rapidly progressing disease, that was a very long wait. Each month I knew that I was getting worse. The spinal stenosis, the polyneuropathy. Don't mean to be too much information, but let's be frank here. By April, I knew that the bladder function had altered dramatically. So I knew that I was progressing very, 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 very quickly. I don't mean any disrespect when I say this, that there are too many occasions where consultants or doctors actually don't listen to patients who perhaps are pretty expert in their field. I'm not saying I'm a medical expert, but I have lived with this since the 80s. I have researched, I have learned, I've studied as very best I can. So I have a bit of an idea what's going on. And a few people haven't liked that. I've remained polite, but it's caused a problem. One consultant actually suggested that that I might not have amyloidosis, that I might have a slipped disc. And I felt like saying, I would give the world to have a slipped disc. That's not what I have at all. And she was not supportive of me going on patisiran. She wanted me to go on another drug, and I wanted patisiran. So anyway, it was eventually sorted. The National Amyloidosis Centre agreed to speak with my consultant and confirmed that as an informed patient, that was the treatment that I wanted. But it makes the road so much rockier. I don't understand why some doctors or consultants feel challenged by patients trying to be participants in the process rather than, so it's a shame that happens. And then there are others that are fantastic. We, as a group, we also linked up with Rare Diseases Northern Ireland. We have worked with them. We have made videos on rare diseases. ATTR amyloidosis is one of them. And that's going to be used from this month, I think, at the local university here in Magee for the nurse education. And it's also going to be used in the doctor training. Al-Ilam has we work with all the pharmaceutical companies. We don't have any allegiances. We work with everybody. The same in this part of the world. We work with politicians of every political party. We don't get involved in any of that. 1,600 information leaflets were sent out to healthcare providers here in the north of Ireland. So a lot of good work is being done and a lot more needs to be done, especially the pathway to genetic testing. That's an absolute nightmare and lottery, both in the north of Ireland and the south. So we really need to have discussions like this, people coming together to try and help everybody move things forward, always remembering that it's about the patient, always remembering it's about them and their carers and their families, and the understanding that we really need each other.